Someone I tell you will remember us even in another lifetime. Sappho.
I'm here talking with Liliana. I'm excited. I've been following your art for I think about a year now. I befriended you online and
Yes.
Have been just waiting to be able to catch one of your exhibits. I know this is your second exhibit.
Yes, my second solo.
Second solo exhibit. Yes, you've been. Actually, I saw that you were part of the Creepy Kawaii
Teeny tiny art show.
Yeah, so I had gone to that. I didn't realize that your work was in it. So I probably did see your art previously. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you and kind of see what your art's about.
What I've been up to lately.
Yes, exactly. So the first thing I wanted to ask about was your chosen medium. I see that on your artist statement you mentioned mixed media.
Yes.
So why mixed media as opposed to like oil painting or anything else? Like what made you what drew you to this specific medium?
I'm drawn a lot towards textiles, and like you said, traditional media is considered, like oil painting, sculpture, and I feel like queer identity exists outside of that, and it's like, how can my medium reflect that? And I'm also drawn to textiles in the sense that it's considered very feminine, and especially like embroidery and quilting, which are elements I try to utilize in my work. They're considered like not fine art, they're considered like, oh, that's a hobby, or oh, that's just women's work. And it's like, how can I uplift these different identities of myself and put them into the fine art world?
That's interesting that you chose it for those specific reasons, and taking something that seems ordinary and applying it to put out your message. What sort of materials do you use? You mentioned I noticed I've seen embroidery hoops.
Yes.
You do screen printing too, right?
Yes, I used to do a lot more screen printing when I was back at Stanislaus because we had a nice printmaking shop.
Nice.
But now that I graduated and I don't have access to that, it's kind of like pivoting and trying to see what I can do on my own. So like my newest piece, which is this one, I kind of had to utilize the photographs themselves, like the raw photographs, because a lot of times I would like scan the photo and then I'd screen print it. But since I don't have access to the screen printing, it's like, okay, what can I do with what I have? So it's just switching it up, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, has that led you in like different directions? Do you feel like that's kind of pulled a little something different out of you as a result, or?
Yeah, I feel like it has, because I like the idea of screen printing because I didn't have to destroy or like mess with the original photos. And I had a colleague of mine give me some artistic critique on this, and he's like, you look like you're too scared to destroy the photos. And I'm like, yes, I am, because it's like I feel kind of bad. I get attached to these photos that like, especially the ones I enjoy. And this was like kind of freeing in the sense that I was like, okay, I need to just like do it. If I want it to progress, I have to push my boundaries and my limits.
How did that feel? Like
it was scary because it's like you can't, once you rip it and destroy it, you can't bring it back, which is funny because all of my pieces I am ripping and destroying, but it's like I'm not destroying the actual photos. And this felt more like destroying the actual photos.
And even I noticed you used found materials as well. I imagine that plays into it somewhat too. Like this used to belong to somebody.
Yeah.
There's a kind of value attributed to it already because it was something used. Yeah, that's really interesting. Another technique I've noticed you mentioned was obstruction. I thought it was interesting you specifically used that word, and that there was a few techniques that you use to highlight that. So,
yes.
How does that play out in your art?
I feel like the obstruction aspect plays into the idea of that like queer people are like hidden from society and aren't normally seen. And I like the idea that like I'm covering up these images through means of layering, rips, tears, inking, staining, and it's trying to like, the image is there, but you kind of have to work to find the image, kind of like how as a queer person that I've had to work to find myself and to find representation, whether that's in history, in the art world, or even today.
I thought that was incredible. And when I saw that in your artist statement, I just thought that was so cool. I had mentioned to you earlier that I I hadn't read, your bio and your statement. I had experienced your art just, from your Instagram mostly. And I had no idea there was so much intentionality behind like every step of the process. It gave me this whole like newfound appreciation for your art. I thought that was so interesting. It even made me reconsider how I approach my own art. Like what ways can I, use specific techniques to put forth, my message or intention. So I thought that was incredible. Ink washes and I thought, staining and stuff like that. I thought that was really interesting. After I read that, I did see that you do certain techniques like that. Yeah. There was one piece, I don't see it, but it had like almost like a light piece of, like it was a white piece of fabric, but it's like kind of see-through.
Yeah. I think that was like an old curtain I found from the thrift store. And originally I wanted to screen print on the fabric itself, but that wasn't working. So I got the power wash and I got rid of it. But then I was like, okay, maybe it could be in front and it's like a curtain. But yeah.
No, I thought that was amazing, and it did very much feel like the piece was hidden almost, and
like you're almost intruding on this like moment.
Yeah. And what a powerful statement, and again, just with use of technique, that really interested me as well too. I myself want to be able to put, more intentionality and messaging behind my art, but I don't like to scream about it. I mean, I literally yell. I'm in a metal band, but you get what I'm saying. I don't. I feel like it's so easy to ignore if you're so pointed with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I prefer like subversion for it to be in there, and if
you want people to think about it instead of just directly telling them.
Exactly that. And how much more powerful if they come to this conclusion on their own, or if they start to like. If it's almost like you're laying out these hints, kind of wanting them to not draw to a specific conclusion, but to reconsider things, to question things. So I think that's incredibly powerful.
I feel like for me too, even like art that isn't queer, I feel like queer people tend to find the hints and stuff, and I feel like I utilize a lot of couples or pairs, and it's like maybe these people are just two best friends, they're just two besties, but I feel like as a queer person you kind of see that and you're like, is there something more to that? And I like that sense of like deniability, because I feel like some people are going to be like, oh, that's not, they're not gay, and it's just like they're just friends, and it's like, well, to me, I'm going to push the narrative that they are gay, because why not?
Yeah, I immediately I thought of you have one of two cowgirls together. And I thought that was really cool too. Again, like this could be an amazing friendship, or like an
it could be something more.
Bond.
Yes.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. That's really interesting. I can edit this. I'm just trying to go over the bullet points in my head again. Found objects.
Yes.
So what sort of? I mean, I saw you mention thrift stores. You find photographs, vintage shops, and stuff like that. Do you do any wandering around? Again, I mentioned Eddie earlier, and I know he's gone down alleyways and stuff. So where do you look for these sort of items?
I mainly go to the thrift stores to find these items. Usually it's like whatever piece just calls to me, and what piece I'm like, okay, that's an interesting piece. Maybe I could use it for something, and I'll save it. And then it's like maybe months later, I'll be like, hey, I have that one thing, like these embroidery hoops I had for a while, and I just couldn't figure out a use for them. And it wasn't until, like I said, maybe even a year later that I was like, hey, like that could be a good idea. A lot of the photos I do get from eBay. A lot of people ask, and they're like, oh, really? Like people do that? And it's like, yeah, like people just sell like 100 of these photos in bulk for like $25. And then I go through them and I sift the ones that I want to use. Like I say, I'm mainly drawn to the use of pairs and to women, and yeah.
I saw you even use AI occasionally.
Yes.
I thought that was incredibly interesting, considering our current environment where so many artists have like such a strong stance, either for or against it. I'm personally not the biggest fan of completed work, in the sense of like the art was entirely generated by AI, but I myself have used AI to create components, for things that you can't necessarily find, and also for the same similar reason that we mentioned earlier, where it's like I don't want to rip up this picture or whatever. And I've even taken pictures and fed it into an AI generator and had it reinterpret, I guess. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. How did that? What drew you to using that? And
A professor had actually like brought up the idea to me. I was also like very much against AI, and even now sometimes I'm like, I don't know, I'm like, should I keep using it, should I not? But my professor, I was like complaining to him, I was like, I'm having a hard time finding photos that I want. Like, I'll spend hours and hours trying to find like a specific photo that I have in my head, and I can't find one, especially one that has like queer undertones to it. And my professor's like, well, why don't you put in an AI generator and see what you come up with? And I was like, that's a good idea. And so I started playing with it, and I feel like the way I make my art, which is like layering and screen printing and like obscuring parts of it, it kind of hides that AI aspect. Like,
I had no idea until I read it in your statement. I was completely oblivious. I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, a lot of the untitled pieces are like the real photographs, and then a lot of the titled pieces are ones with AI, which is kind of how I try to differentiate them sometimes. Like this one with the 2 girls making tortillas, like that's an image I had in my head that I wanted to convey a story about, but I couldn't find one for the life of me that was like a real photo. So I was just like, you know what? AI generator hit me, and yeah.
Seeing that in your statement, I've been studying the Situationists. I don't know if you ever heard of that movement. It's a later surrealist-inspired movement, very politically driven, not that much art. But one of the things I found incredibly interesting was they did employ cut-up techniques or collage techniques. They intentionally used commercial art and would subvert it. They would maybe in a comic panel, erase the lettering and put in some profound statement. Their whole thing is kind of about society as a spectacle. Us interpreting our lives through the medium of images. So immediately that's what I thought of. Where seeing the way you use it, I'm like, well, maybe that's how it should be used in a more subversive manner. Where you're not necessarily stealing someone's art. And it for me it pointed out the fact that is it more offensive to directly take someone's art like and cut it out of a photo or a magazine, or to generate something that's has a similar how much more offensive is it that I generated this as an AI generator instead of they would even like paint over actual paintings and stuff like that. Again, very politically driven. Take a classic piece of artwork and spoil it with your own. So I didn't see a difference. So I thought that was really interesting. And also that you're outspoken about it. The handful of friends that I have where I see them using it, they're not telling anybody that they're using it. You can tell, obviously. Like I said, an entire image generated by it is usually pretty apparent.
I see my use of AI as a tool, not like the only thing that's being used. Like, I'm not just using AI and then calling it my own. I'm using the AI to create a scene in my head, and then putting my own artistic spin onto it. So I'm adding to it. Reinterpreting it.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I hope more artists pick up on that and start using it as a tool of subversion rather than this cheap way to generate commercial art. So, and I also saw you mentioned it a few times already how powerfully identity plays into all of this.
Yes.
I think that's incredible as well. That's something I've not been able to incorporate into my own art, but it's something I think about quite often, and even even bouncing around from different social groups. Sometimes I'm interviewing an indie band, sometimes it's a metal band, hardcore, EDM bands like goth type stuff, and other times painters and other artists and stuff like that. So, it's hard
nice
not to consider
talking to creatives and like bouncing ideas and like seeing how other people do their own thing.
That's one of the biggest reasons I started this. I realized that my favorite conversations ever is artists. And it really like rejuvenates me. Really,
it does.
I'm normally quite introverted, pretty quiet. You get me talking to another artist and I can't shut up.
It's like kind of like a different world. I feel like that artists live in sometimes.
They definitely see the world through quite a different lens. And then even from artist to artist, it's like the interpretation changes so much, especially people that are a little bit more introspective about it, where they actually reflect on these things and kind of what their art means, why they use these techniques. I actually had a question. So I've noticed there's a good bit of artists, including my friends, that seem to create the art unconsciously, and then the interpretation seems to come later.
Afterwards? Yeah.
I was curious if you go into these pieces with a specific intention, or is this more of, again, like an unconscious process, and then afterwards you yourself are interpreting it?
I feel like I go in with like a specific intention of maybe perhaps like a feeling I want to convey. Sometimes it does. I feel like on my emotional state, sometimes it does change. Like, if I notice I'm upset, like the photo feels kind of like grim and the art feels kind of grim, and then it's like, oh, like I kind of didn't intend for that to happen. And then if I work on a piece when I'm in a better headspace, it just like suddenly becomes like airy and light. But most of the time I am trying to be intentional. And like I said, I kind of work with whatever photograph at the time catches my eye or like I draw inspiration from.
Do you learn more as you're displaying them? And the first time I noticed this, I had friends taking me out to art exhibits.
Yeah.
And being nosy, I love to hear other artists describing I don't know, I guess audience. It's not really an audience; they're not up on the stage, but the viewers. People are asking questions about it, and there's a few times where I'm like, that looks like that's the first time they've ever answered that question. Maybe they hadn't even considered, what it means, or maybe this is the first time that they
thought about it in that way.
Yes, exactly. So although you are going into it with quite a bit of intention, do you kind of discover even more when you're displaying it or when you're discussing it, or?
I feel like I discover a little bit more by the end of it, and working with the piece, sometimes I'm like, okay, this piece feels complete now. Like the feeling feels complete, the moment feels complete, the memory feels complete.
I think that's pretty much when I know when to stop too, is for me, it's when I can't think of what else to do to it.
Yeah,
when I
exactly.
Can't, my mind's usually so critical of every part of the artistic process that when I can get that part of my mind to shut up, when the critic just finally stops, I'm like, okay, leave it alone.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's great to take a break from a piece. Like this piece I was working on for like maybe a few months just because it was like, it's pissing me off. And at some point I was like, I just hung it on my wall. So one of my professors says like, just live with your piece for a while. And then I would put it on my wall. I would work on it some more. I put it on my wall and I'll be laying in bed and I'll be like, yeah, that piece from that one little spot far away kind of is bugging me, and then I'll fix it. And then eventually I just had it on my wall and it didn't piss me off anymore, and I was like, it's done. Yeah, it's good now.
But that's interesting. That's you're being inspired by your own art.
Yeah.
Like, having it displayed around you, and all of a sudden you get these moments of insights, and it's either to add to it or like, okay, no, I'm just gonna leave it alone. That's really cool. I've never actually heard an artist mention that. I'm sure others do something similar, but no one I've talked to has ever mentioned that specifically. That's really interesting.
That's how I feel like I finish a lot of my pieces. It's like I hang it up in a spot in my room that I can see, and then it just like is in the corner of my eye, and I'm not getting like tunneled vision by it by being like, oh, I need to work on it, or I'm working on it.
No, that's really interesting. I also discovered the poet Sappho because of you. I thought that was such a cool quote that you had.
And a cool history.
Yeah, I right before I came, I was reading a handful of poems. There was one that I was specifically drawn to. I forgot what it was called. It was like another something, but it was a very short one. How does that play out in your work? Was that kind of like an initial like influence, or is it?
I feel like it was an initial influence. Like I had the idea in my head of like when I started getting more serious about my art, because like you said, sometimes you make art just for the fun of it and it doesn't have any deeper meaning, which is fine. I think that's important too.
It is.
But when I wanted to start making something more intentional, I came across that quote and I was like, that's exactly what I want to convey in my art. And that's kind of like what helped snowball and influence the rest of my works.
Incredible.
Is like the idea of that quote. And then the story of Sappho herself, that like a lot of her works were destroyed because she was making poems about queer identity. And
makes it all the more valuable, right?
Yeah, and how maybe these photos of the ones that might be of real people. Like, we don't know their story. They could have been queer. These friendships could have had something more to them, but we would never know because that part of society wants to hide queer identity, and we don't consider queer identity being worthy of saving.
And that's still happening.
Yeah.
Right? You know, even today, the methods might have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Not so much always, but still, you know, specific voices are still continually being silenced and
suppressed.
Yeah, and even in this age where, you know, the digital age where you just kind of assume everything is archived and backed up somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not. There's so much being lost, you know, even you know, I'm thinking like early 90s, like in web pages and stuff like that. There's movements to try and, you know, reclaim these and stuff like that. But kind of really highlighting to me that this, you know, may not be as permanent as you think. And it can be, unfortunately, a lot easier to silence voices that make us uncomfortable. Like, you know, a lot easier than I would like, you know, is one of the reasons I'm sitting here talking to you, because I might not have a very large voice, but the voice I do have, I would like to highlight, you know, artists that are like saying something, that are challenging the status quo, and now more so than ever. So.
Yeah, especially now. And I think I think it's interesting when you say like archiving and like preserving these things, because I feel like sometimes with my art I don't work with like stuff that's archival, so it's kind of interesting being like, when I'm an old lady, like how much more will these pieces disintegrate, and like can that play into my themes even more? So I think that's like interesting, and I guess like only time will tell, because like I'm aging them myself purposefully, but it's like I wonder how age and time will age these even beyond my control.
There's already a sense of impermanence because of the medium that you're using.
Yes.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Awesome. This has been really cool. I'm really happy I finally got to sit down and talk with you. I'm happy.
It was nice talking to you too.
I finally got to see your work in person, and I was so excited when you showed me where we're going to be doing the interview, because I was like, oh, that's perfect. It's like right behind us. You know, I do want to, you know, point out where to find your art and whatnot, but thankfully they don't have to look any further than right behind us. It's just right here. So
a nice little sample.
Yes, and I'm excited to see how your meet and greet goes today.
Thank you.
I would like to see more artists do things like this, and incredible that local businesses around here are supporting that. You know, shout out to Luna.
Yes,
it's incredible that they're giving you a space to display your art and to discuss it and to you know, speak with the public about it. I think that's incredible. Where can people like look you up or find you?
You can
social
find
web
me.
pages?
I mainly post a lot on Instagram. I need to like pull up my handle right here. The main one that I post on that has my art is my name, which is Liliana, Liliana _Fig_.
Awesome. And you had quite a bit on your webpage too. I saw that. There were some pieces on there that you didn't have. I think that you didn't have on your Instagram. So that was interesting as well. Do you know your webpage offhand, or if not, it's on your Instagram?
Yeah, you know, if not, it's linked in my bio. Instagram.
Yeah, that's how I found it.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's been incredible talking to you.
Thank you for taking the time to interview me.
Was there anything else you wanted to point out or highlight? Something I didn't bring up?
That's all I had for the moment.
Awesome.
But thank you.
I'm excited for the meet and greet. Good talking to you.
Nice talking to you.